In sports, the scoreboard doesn't tell the full story, but Netflix does. Stories about dads who happen to be world-class quarterbacks and a battle for the heart, soul, and direction of the multi-billion-dollar business of F1. Whether you're a diehard fan or you're brand new, Netflix has the stories for every type of fan. You can watch these incredible sports stories like Quarterback, F1 Drive to Survive, Untold, and many more now on Netflix.
Hello and welcome to a new podcast, The Paddock and the Pavilion with Stephen Wallace. In each show, Stephen will interview someone connected to the world of horse racing or cricket.
Hello and welcome to The Paddock and the Pavilion. It's back to the bat and ball, or gloves in the case of today's guest, Chris Scott, the former Nottinghamshire and Durham wicketkeeper. Chris was part of two county championship winning sides with Nottinghamshire in the 1980s. And in June 1994, when playing for Durham, dropped legendary West Indian batsman Brian Lara when he was on 18. Only problem being, he went on to score 501 not out, the highest ever individual score in cricket history. In today's podcast, Chris gives a frank account of that famous innings and talks about his successful 2-decade cricket coaching career. Don't forget there is still time to send in a question for Richard Pittman for our Ask Richard About the Grand National podcast. I'd really like a question from one of our overseas listeners, so do get in touch before the 26th of March. Enjoy today's podcast. Hello, Chris. Welcome to the Paddock and the Pavilion.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming on the show. What have you been doing in the latest lockdown?
The latest lockdown,
There's been so many
to go online. And yeah, actually, when did the latest one start? I think from September, because I think that was before the last lockdown, I applied online to be a delivery driver and for Sainsbury's, and did a little bit of coaching as well. On top of that, with I was lucky enough to be offered Cambridgeshire in the 15s and help out with the EPP, which is the most talented youngsters in both girls and boys in Cambridgeshire. So I was combining the two, and then this latest lockdown hit. So all I've been doing since it started is, or I say all, I've never worked so hard in my life, but been delivering food in the Cambridgeshire area.
Oh, so you've been delivering for Sainsbury's. So you haven't got an orange shirt on or anything, so perhaps you've got an orange jacket.
Not at the moment. No, I've got plenty of slash there from them. They've been quite generous.
Well, that's a bit different from keeping wicket. But today we're going to talk about your cricket career with Nottinghamshire and Durham and your even longer coaching career in Cambridgeshire. We will get on to one of the things that you're famous for, and it's not just the one thing, talking about Brian Charles Lara, but we'll get to him in good time. You're born in Lincolnshire in January 1964. How did you first get into cricket?
Family, as most people do. I was lucky enough I was born in Lincolnshire, but there was a club just in the Nottinghamshire border called Collingham where my dad played, my uncles played, and my dad actually stopped playing quite early. He was a farmer with 3 kids, so he had enough on his plate. But it tended to be part of the weekend ritual that come tea time on a Saturday on a Sunday, we'd go down to Collingham and watch the end of the cricket. And of course, back to space when the games sort of finished, there was impromptu games of cricket with kids on the outfield, big space. Well, as ever in those days, parents were in the bar. So it was always in our family. I mean, my family's more of a rugby family, but I just sort of took to cricket quite early, and Collingham was and still is a really lovely family club, and that's where it began. So began in the under 13s, and I showed a bit something, and it started from there.
And were you always a wicketkeeper?
No, I wasn't. I was wicket keeping was literally as simple as I never even thought about it until I was about 11 or 12, and Collingham had an under-13 side that my dad was manager of, and I think there was one lad who was the designated wicketkeeper, he batted as well, was designated wicketkeeper. And at the end of the game, he said to me, Chris, why don't you have a go at it? You must be better than him. So I was stuck there, and that was me. Kept wicket from then on, and it was quite a good way of getting into the Collingham men's second team, and then in the first team, because I played for Collingham first team at the age of 14 or something, or 15, as a wicketkeeper. I wouldn't have got in on batting alone, so it did help me. But I'd say until Notts took me on at the age of 17, I never considered myself wicket-keeping to be my first suit. But as I say, I would never have been good enough to have made it as a batsman alone, so everything went out okay.
You mentioned there that you got taken on by Notts, and I looked up your second 11 debut in May 1981 against Surrey, a game at Notts won by 9 wickets. Interestingly, in the Surrey side, they had 3 test players, only one at that current time, Intikhab Alam, but also Alex Stewart and Carl Rackerman, the Australian, also played in that game. What do you remember about your second 11 debut?
I remember I didn't have a clue what was going on, and I remember it was at Trent Bridge, so it was fantastic sort of honour. In fact, I think it was Alex Stewart's first game for Surrey seconds. I bumped into him 2 or 3 times over the last 20 odd years or so, and we always talk about that game because I think he batted 9. I think he was, he came in at the end and was like 5 or 6 not out in both innings. So it was his career went upwards from there. But it was just as you say, there was test players. There was at Trent Bridge, and I think in those days, I was 17 years old. I think in those days it was just a blissful ignorance or naivety, if you like, of how good these people are and what sort of level you have to get to. But from playing, I remember saying to the slips at the time, all I'd done is play for Collingham and play for age group side. So I think the longest game I've ever played in was something like 45 overs a side, and in that game we got a big score first innings and then made Surrey follow on. So I was keeping wicket for 2 whole days, and that was a bit of a struggle. But it was. As you say, it was so long ago now, and if you look at it, it was an incredible sort of Surrey second 11. Yeah, it was.
Yes, well, you got 2 catches in the game, and in 2 months later, you were playing in your first class debut for Notts at Chelmsford against a very strong Essex side. Was Bruce French, who was then the regular Notts wicketkeeper, was he injured on that day?
Well, I was taken on at the age of 17, really, because, Bruce was only sort of 21, I think, then. And I think Notts felt, the manager, Ken Taylor, who was a fantastic bloke, I think he felt that there's no point taking another keeper on the same age as Bruce, because Bruce was going to be there for, he was a fantastic wicket keeper. So Bruce was going to be there for long term, so they may as well have take somebody on and young and get them to learn their ropes. And but the thing is, I don't think what anybody vouched for was he was to break his finger a couple of months into the season, and a month into the season. It was very early. Now I assumed that they would give the gloves for those two games that Bruce was injured. I was assuming they were going to give them to a couple of the older stagers who'd kept wicket in the past. There's Mike Harris and Bashir Hassan who'd kept wicket. I think I assumed that if anything was to happen to Bruce, they would give the gloves to them. But Ken Taylor was a manager that thought, well, I'm not going to learn anything by giving the gloves to those guys. So let's see what. Let's give it to Chris at 17. And I was although I was 17. I was a very young 17. I was not very mentally or physically developed at that age. I was still a boy, and we're at Chelmsford. Not a very good wicket at the time, and suddenly I was keeping wicket to Richard Hadley and Clive Rice, and on a wicket that actually spun square, there was Eddie Hemmings and Mike Bohr, 2 fantastic spinners. So it was a real baptism, to be honest. The second game I went on, I didn't bat in that game. The second game I went on to Hampshire and played against their first team, and Malcolm Marshall was playing for them, where he did run through us both innings. And although in the 2 games I did struggle, and I did show passages where I could keep wicket, but there was also quite a few mistakes in there. I think what happened was, I'd say we'll go on to it, records seem to follow me about, but in the Hampshire game, we were bowled out for 143 by Malcolm Marsh and another guy, and Clive Rice was 108 not out, and that is a record in terms of percentage for what an individual score in a total score. But the thing is, I got 6, and I showed a bit of bravery, hung around with him, and we put on 50. And I think out of the 2 games, although it was a big struggle, I think that's where the manager saw something in me, and saw a little bit of bravery at the time, and stupid naivety, I think. But that stood me in good stead. So those 2 games live in the memory, because it was quite a struggle. But I just did show enough, and then Bruce came back, and we actually won the championship that year. So it was a very memorable year.
Yeah, certainly eye openers to start your first-class career. How nervous was it keeping to Richard and Clive Rice as a 17-year-old?
Well, I was always a very nervous cricketer. I was more nervous playing for Western Cove at the age of 50 than nerves never went away from me. But I think at 17, I think I was just naive. I don't think I was too naive to be nervous, and I think the actual reality of that level hit me then. And so consequently, I did have a problem with nerves, but I think in those 2 games, it was a blur, and having Richard Hadley running in, and I was sort of a very small 17-year-old. I just didn't think I probably didn't know what was going on. I wish I'd kept that naivety all the way through, perhaps.
It must have been a blur facing Malcolm Marshall in 1981 as well.
It was. I do have one recollection. I went. Talking about being naive, I went out to bat. We were on a hat trick, actually, my first delivery in first class cricket, and I went out to bat, and I just had one of those sort of under 12 thigh pads that was about the size of a handkerchief, and I had no chest guard, no arm guard or anything, and I had a helmet with the side pieces. Do you remember those? I didn't even have a full grill, and I think, as I say, if I'd have known then what I know now, I'd have completely armed myself up, because I do remember a delivery. He came around the wicket to me, and I do remember a delivery that I just saw in front of my nose and managed to just duck my head down, and it just skinned the top of my helmet. And I think to myself, a millisecond later, and I could have looked perhaps better looking, but I could have looked facially a lot different. But it was fantastic experience looking back, really, to face the great man.
Well, after those 2 games, you then went to become a regular player in the second 11, but really became a frequent member of the Nottinghamshire side in 86, 87 and 88, when Bruce presumably was playing a lot more for England. And in 1987, Nottinghamshire won the county championship again. It must have been a thrill to be in the side to win the championship.
Yeah, as you say, I was after in the early 80s. I was very much still a young lad, and I was in the second team. Bruce was getting a lot of attention to play for England, and quite rightly. And he was picked in '86. And in those days, if you played one Test match, it did take him out of the games for a couple of games. So the whole of '86, he was in England side, so I got a good run then. '87, he got back. He was in the England side as well, but he also caught chickenpox, I seem to remember, and he was quite poorly from that. And then in '88, he had a finger operation that first took him out the whole season. And in '89, he still struggled a little bit with injury, and not as quite as much. So I was getting a good run of games from about '86 to '89, but then he came back as, I think, Jack Russell was the England wicketkeeper, and for a couple of years after that, I was back in the second team. It's 26, 27. But yeah, '87 was a season where I played, I think, half the games, and we would just had Richard Hadley was just the greatest cricketer around, and he he got 100 wickets and 1,000 runs, I think, that year. And it was an awesome side. If you think about the batting order of Chris Broad, Tim Robinson, Derek Randall, Paul Johnson, and then you had Clive Rice and Richard Hadley, and the spinners, Eddie Hemmings. I'm going to miss a name out too here, but it was a phenomenal side, and it was a phenomenal year. We won the championship, we won the NatWest, and the second in the Sunday League. So it was fantastic to be a bit part player in that.
Well, you say bit part player. You played 12 first-class matches in 1987, scored 250 runs and took 27 catches. And talking about Richard, was he the best bowler that you kept wicket to?
I was lucky enough to keep wicket, actually, to Malcolm Marshall in an invitation game. And very similar people and bowlers in terms of, when I kept to Malcolm Marshall, it was an invitation side game up in Scarborough. But he had an enormous amount. We were playing South Africa, and we had an enormous amount of pride, bowled, spectacularly well. But Richard Hadley was somebody I kept wicket to quite a lot, and he was just ahead of his time in terms of professionalism and looking after himself and leaving nothing to chance. And then on top of that, he just was a fantastic bowler, just quicker than you would think, hit the seam, every ball, swung it, aggressive, and he was quite nervous to keep to because he didn't suffer. A very, very nice person, didn't suffer fools, so he wanted professionalism and from everybody he played with, and he was a phenomenal cricketer.
And as you say, after I think 89, your opportunities fell a bit with Bruce coming back from playing for England, with Jack Russell getting established in the England side. Was it then you were looking to move to another county to get more opportunities?
During those 80s, there were a couple of conversations I had with counties that I may have moved, but I was quite happy playing at Trent Bridge. I was playing with mates that I'd grown up with. Perhaps I got a little bit complacent, but every county only has one wicket keeper, and you could name any county from that era, and they were all incredibly good. So to say I could have gone to another county is not actually true, because there isn't a county in the 80s that didn't have a top draw keeper. So it was in 1990 and 91. It was the realisation that was probably going to be it. But I was lucky enough that Durham were making a bid to become first class, and I'm sure they had their minds on one or two keepers, but I was lucky enough to get the call to go up and talk to them. And it was probably, looking back, it probably came a couple of years too late for them, but it was a very exciting time, and it was a great experience. And I had the opportunity to be the first team regular keeper for them. There was a local lad who was a local legend I was competing with, and at the start I played the championship stuff, he played the one days, which was working pretty well. But I think I never really nailed it. I had good days in the first team in both Notts and Durham, but I just never quite felt that I was good enough at that level consistently. I'd have 3 good days and then a bad day, and I think all goalkeepers would tell you that that's not quite good enough, really. And I found first class cricket a struggle, but I did have some good days and a bad one, which I'm sure you're going to come along to.
Well, we haven't got there yet, so you do yourself a bit of a disservice here. You've still got 300 first-class victims. But what was it like when you went to Durham, playing with the like of Ian Botham, Dean Jones, Wayne Larkins, David Graveney, Simon Hughes? What was it like playing with them?
It was brilliant. I mean, the funny thing is that when we started, we started with Dean Jones in the side, and we were going great guns for the first month or so, and then Dino broke his finger. We lost our overseas player, and I think that's when the sort of reality dawned that we were a new side, and we stopped winning games, and we struggled in that first year a little bit. But a lot of people say that those players you mentioned, legends, obviously, that were at the back end of their career, but I think they actually played some of their best cricket when they were at Durham. Wayne Larkins, Phil Bainbridge, these people, Paul Parker played really, really well for Durham. But I think we were just the rest of the squad were just trying to establish themselves. We had minor counties players that were trying to step up. We had players like myself that had not nailed it at another county, so we were having another go. So it just took a bit of time. But those people you mentioned played really well for Durham. It's just it just takes a while, doesn't it, to get established. And I'm really proud of looking back at what Durham have achieved in what's still a relatively short space of time.
Yeah, well, they've certainly done that, winning the championship on numerous occasions and providing a lot of England players. Now, Durham, you played in their first-class game against Oxford University, and you also played in their first county championship game against Leicestershire. What do you remember about that game? Ian Botham got 100.
Yeah, I didn't. I got Norton 1, I think. It was a big crowd. I think that was... there was just a lot of there was attention to that game and to everything we did in those days. And it died down quite quickly, but there was a lot of coverage, a lot of press attention on that one game. We played Leicestershire, a fine side, and typically in Botham, really, that when there was a big crowd on the big stage, he gets 100, and that's what he did. It's a long time ago, but I didn't have a particularly good game. So I don't look back much fondly at that particular game, but I got left out and then got back into the side, and then had a decent first season.
We lost that first county championship game against Leicestershire by 7 wickets, and in the first 2 seasons, 92 and 93, Durham came bottom of the table. You don't think it was the wrong policy signing all those older players? I don't suppose there was a lot of other options, really, or should have they gone with younger players?
No, so I say that if you look at the way those older players performed, it wasn't that because they played very well for Durham. I think it was the fact that it just took a while for... You can't just... it's very difficult just to pluck a team from all over the country and expect them to compete against established first-class counties. I mean, that would be disrespectful to those counties. But I think you'll find with a lot of teams... that are struggling, is that we'd be in a game for a day and a half or two, or first innings, we'd be getting a lead, we'd be doing pretty well, and then out of the blue we'd have a bad session and we'd lose very quickly. And I think that can be said about a lot of sports teams that are struggling. That first year, I've no doubt that had Dean Jones not have broken his finger, we'd have done a lot better. And concentrating on those two years, if you look at their one-day records, I think Durham held their own pretty well on the Sunday League and the Benson Hedges and the NatWest as we played them. They had decent performances and were pretty much middle ranking, really. But the championship was a struggle because we would be in a game and then we would lose a game, and it became a habit. And we didn't say that first year we didn't have an overseas player for quite some time, and it just took a while. But there were signs, there were signs as I was leaving that there were young lads coming through into the nets like Paul Collingwood and Steve Harmison and Jimmy Daly and people like that. So you could see what the planning was. That was just to buy a couple of years to allow the local talent to come through, and there was a lot of it. And so when I left, you could just feel that they were getting something that was going to be quite special.
Well, we'll move on then to 1994, which was, playing-wise, a good year for you. You got 670 first-class runs, scored 2 centuries, 56 catches. Durham came 16th in the table. And on the 3rd of June, you dropped a catch off Simon Brown when Brian Lara was on 18. And as the whole world seems to know, he went on to get a world record score of 500. How often do you get asked this question?
The funny thing is, after it happened, I knew it was an absolute catastrophe. But county cricket was, in those days, was one of those things where I had a game the next day and the day after and the day after. So it didn't really dawn on me what has happened. No, the funny thing is about the sort of courtesy of opposing players in England, but nobody mentioned it for the rest of that season they played against. It would have been an easy, cheap shot as I came out to bat to mention it, but nobody did for the rest of the season. As you say, it was probably my best season in county cricket, and it was just at the end of that season, I think reality hit that what had happened, and this was going to be quite a big story. I don't think anybody is going to get past 500 again, and I think it probably didn't affect me for the rest of the season. But I think in the off season, when I realised, well, this is probably the only thing I'm going to be remembered for, and it is quite a big story, and it's never sort of diminished. It seems to be as big now as it was then. So. At the time, I just felt terrible because I think Simon Brown was bowling fantastically at the time. It was early season. It was swinging round corners with a duke ball, and he was bowling sides out for fun. And he was just getting mentioned by the England team and for England selection. And I think Brian Lara, on the back of a world record score in the West Indies against England, he came to England and scored 6 centuries on the bounce. And I think, had I caught that one, which I should have done, then I'm feeling he may have got an England place. And also Durham were playing well at the time. We'd won 3 out of the first 4 games, and it was just the attention that they didn't really need at that time. So I felt, it was. I don't look back at it and laugh and think it's all a good joke, because it was a bit of a howler at a bad time. But looking back, I'm just wondering how it ever occurred, because the game was a weird one, because we batted first and got 570 for 5, I think, or 6. And then when Warwickshire batted, they finished day 2 on 190 for 2, I think, and that's when it happened. And Brian Lara was on 120. And the third day was completely washed out. In those days, you had it seems bizarre now, but in those days you have a one-day game in the middle of a 4-day game where we lost a bowler. And so on the 4th day, the captains got together and decided that because the wicket was still flat and good, the short boundary, there was no chance of setting up a declaration or positive result, so we'll just play the last day out for points. Which I thought, well, at the time I remember thinking, well, my howler hasn't actually cost us a game, so I was feeling a bit more relaxed. But then I thought to myself, the greatest player arguably who's ever been is starting the day on 120 not out, and he's just got all day to bat. This could have some serious consequences. And I've subsequently learnt that Brian Lara, being the height of the genius he is, I've subsequently learnt that he asked the question about the world record score. So I think while the rest of us were thinking about the end of the game and all the Durham players were thinking about a few hours in the field and going home, he came out and sort of attacked this world record score. And but I don't want to take anything, I don't want to diminish what he did, because in my opinion, he's the greatest batsman that's ever been. And he just hit every ball for 4 for a day. It was incredible. And we were trying desperately to get him. We had a bowler down, but we were trying desperately, obviously, to get him out, because it was getting more and more embarrassing, his score, really, for us.
Well, thanks for sharing that with me. I say, you said Durham scored 556, and then Warwickshire scored 810 for 4, and Brian Lara scored 390 in a day. It must have been a very flat wicket. But going back,
he was a genius, and I say I know Trevor Penny a little bit, and he got 44 in a partnership of 311, and And not because he's a slow scorer, it's just he couldn't face many deliveries. But as I say, Brian Lara is the greatest player I've played. I've played against a lot of great players. I've been lucky enough, but he was just a different sort of gravy, if you like.
And is it right that he was out off a no ball by Anderson Cummings before you drop your catch?
Well, the first ball he faced, actually, because he's good, because Anderson Cummings knew him quite well. He bounced him first ball, which is a really well-directed bouncer. He's gone for a hook and it's hit right at the top of the bat. And on the follow-through, Anderson has tried to catch it and dive and just not quite got there. That was his first ball. And then on 11, he got bowled, leg stump got taken out behind his legs. He did get out like that in test matches a couple of times, I seem to remember. But Anderson Cummings knew that he could target his leg stump. So on 11, he had his leg stump knocked out of the ground. But it was, as I say, that looked up and the umpire signalled low. It was quite a late call, actually, a no ball. So, and then he was playing and missing at Simon Brown all the time, up to 18. And he kept saying to the umpire, it's gone, my form's gone. Because don't forget, he scored 375 against England and then started with 600s. And I remember he nicked, and then I dropped a straightforward chance. And then that, which is, I think it was the last ball of the over. It wasn't. It was the middle of the over. And then the last ball of the over, he gets the singles at the other end. And I stood up to the wicket to a spinner. And so I'm quite close to him. And he's turned around to me and said, my form's going, I've gone. And anyway, it was tea time shortly after, and he goes and has a net. And whoever was throwing to him must be an absolute, brilliant throwdown guy, because after tea, he came out and you've never seen a display like it for the rest of that day. And then for all of the Monday, the last day, was just phenomenal. Just to hit the ball for four in all areas of the ground. But and along the floor most of the time. Didn't hit the ball in the air very much.
Well, thanks very much for sharing that with me. We won't come back to that one. Well, you carried on playing until 1996 when you retired. Was it the right time to retire at the time?
Yeah, it wasn't a real retirement. I had lost my place. I was in the second team. I think I had, I started at 17, and although I'd had some wonderful days, I never really felt about it. So it was just the right time. I'd had enough, really, because I haven't had enough of. I don't want to put anybody off. I mean, cricket's a great career, but after 15 years, I think it was time I did something else, because I wasn't feel as if I couldn't nail the first team. So, being in your 30s and being in the second team, you have to do something else, really. So, yeah, it was all very, all very amicable. I got, great friends with Durham, and it was, at the time, it was the right thing, the best thing for me. I got a job, I got a job very quickly with the Northumberland Cricket Board, which I'm grateful for, and I loved, actually. And, I was very content at the end of it that it was over, and I'd done my best, and I could move on.
And were you doing your coaching badges when you were in the second 11?
I've always done my coaching badges. They've changed over the years of what they're called. Even when I was 17 and just on the staff, that winter, myself and Paul Johnson both did a what was it called back then? A coaching award, the very basic one in the winter. Mike Bohr actually running a teammate. And then I got my senior, and then I got my advanced while I was playing. I always felt I should be doing something like that. I was never very academic at school or anything, so I realised that this was a good way of looking at looking into the future. And then when the ECB formed in 1999 or whatever, it became level 1, level 2, level 3, and I did all of those. And I always felt that if you want to be a coach, you've got to get the qualifications. And so as I say, I wasn't top of the class by any means on any of them, but I learned an awful lot, and I've always, while I've played, always tried to keep up with it all. And I finished in 96, and I'd done my level 3 in 99. So I was, and then my level 4 in 2005. So I was always keen to keep up to date with it all.
And how did you get involved with the Cambridge MCCU? I think that's in 2000.
It was called the Cambridge called the Cambridge UCCE to start with. It was part financed by the EC in those days. And what it was I was a cricket development officer in Northumberland from '96, and they actually financed me to go on the level 3. And I was enjoying myself up there. It was lovely people. But I did my level 3, and then the jobs came up internally about these 6 university centres that were starting up. I think it started at Durham with Graham Fowler, about how the key years in a player's development from 18 to 21 can be a little bit lost if a player wants to go into further education, and particularly at Durham, where there was a lot of very talented players from Surrey and Middlesex and particularly the South that tend to go to Durham University. They were spending 3 years up at Durham, and they wanted to make sure that they had a proper coach and a proper programme up there to make sure that while they were studying, that their levels didn't drop and their progression remained the same. And so the ECB bought into that and created 5 more. And suddenly I had a job that was asking for a level 3 coach, which I was, and preferred played at a highest level, which I did. And there's not many jobs I'm qualified for, so I sent the CV out, and I was lucky enough to get a couple of interviews, and I was offered the Cambridge one. And it's been a lovely place to live, really, for the last 20 odd years.
So it was the ideal job for you, really.
Yeah, there's no doubt that no doubt how lucky I've been to have it, and to have it for so long. 2000, October 2000, I think it started.
And I know Yorkshire's Josh Poyston, a previous guest on the Paddock and the Pavilion, has been through the programme. Are there any other first-class players of note that have gone through the programme when you were working there?
Yeah, Josh was one that wasn't really. Sussex were slightly interested in, but the university programme sort of kick-started him and got him noticed, and probably it's debatable, but in fact he was a member of the MCCU, made him into a professional cricketer. And there were a few like that. There was Gary Park that had a good career up at Durham and Derbyshire. Vikram Banerjee had a good career at Gloucestershire, and Matthew Salisbury, who's still at Durham now. Are people, I think, that may not have got into the first-class game had it not been for the MCCUs. But there are those that were already professional cricketers that you try to keep their development going on track. Zafar Ansari being my most sort of high profile. He was somebody that was adamant that he was going to finish his education and was going to Cambridge regardless, and just trying to make sure that he got everything he needed in terms of his cricket development while he was at university. So it was a mixture of those that came to the centre to try and get themselves in the shop window, and those that were already professional cricketers, already on a county radar, just to make sure that they stayed on the right development path. I don't want to mention too many names because I'm bound to forget one, but there's been a lot at Cambridge, and there's been an awful lot in all of the 6 centres. If there's ever a list printed, there's so many that have gone to a centre and come out with a degree and it's not hampered their development at all. And I'm quite good family friends with Tom Wesley, and he's a classic example that at 21 he got a degree under his belt, and it hadn't impinged on his career at all. In fact, it improved it, and he ended up playing for England and captain Essex. So I think the scheme was very much had its place, and I don't think there's any player that's been on it that regrets being on it.
Because a lot of people, older people, think about the Cambridge University side, but this was a different development to that, because but you were still playing first class matches, weren't you?
Yeah, it was set up where there were 6 different clusters of universities. So in the 6 centres, there were 14 universities in total that ranged from whatever course or whatever A-level grades a person, boy or a girl, got. There was a university out there for them that was on the cricket programme, was on the MCCU programme, or UCC as it started programme. So we were twinned with Cambridge University, and Anglia Ruskin University was our centre. And Anglia Ruskin is a university. It's very well known regionally in those days, not quite so well known nationally in those days. It's improved since then, but and so it was a great magnet for young cricketers to hop on a course there and get involved in the programme. And I think the proudest thing I have is that looking back is that I've been there 20 years, and there's lads that are now heading towards middle age. But when I actually bump into them in life, whether they've made it at the top of cricket or not, they're all doing well, whatever field they're in, and they all. I'm pretty sure they'll all say that being part of the MCCU programme was a big part of that. They developed as people as well as cricketers, and it's lovely to go to, if I ever go to a wedding reception of theirs or meet socially, it's lovely to see them all doing really well. And Cambridge University lads as well, but they tend to do well anyway. But it's nice to meet up with them and see how well they're doing in life in general, even if they're not all professional cricketers.
Well, that's good to hear. Is the scheme is still going? You're not there yourself now, are you?
Our scheme, the Cambridge Centre, has ceased to be. It just came down to finances in the end. So the MCC were developing Lords and had and cut back their money. I mean, the MCC have been fantastic for 15 years or more, but they had to make cutbacks. So that was passed down onto the centre, where the Cambridge and Anglia Ruskin University had to contribute a lot more than they had previously to the scheme, and the numbers just were not stacking up. So our centre finished. Cambridge University will still have a nice fixture list, but the actual centre at Cambridge has finished. The MCC have finished altogether now. The other 5 centres are in a little bit of limbo. What with COVID and furlough, they're continuing as normal this year. Obviously, fixtures have been affected by COVID. I think if anybody's listening, the youngsters just keep your eye on it, watch the space. It's well worth going to if the ECB take it up and continue to contribute to it.
Right. Well, let's hope they do. Although obviously finances are tight for cricket at the moment. It is.
I think the ECB have got so much to look at in terms of where they make some savings, and I think everybody makes a case for themselves, don't they? So it's been a positive. The centres have been a very positive thing for the game. I'm sure of that.
And you said earlier, what role have you got now?
The Cambridgeshire County Cricket Board have always been good to me. They've always given me little roles here and there, dovetailing with my job. And so I was made redundant in August, and they gave me a Cambridgeshire under-15s, which is a great thrill for me, really, and a great age to be taking a group of players. I'm also involved with their emerging players programme at girls and boys within the county. But these are not full-time roles, so I'm sending my CV out here and there, and I'm driving a delivery van for Sainsbury's in the area, which is that's hard work, but it's quite fun. And so like most people, I think these are very strange and difficult times for everybody, and I'm, like everybody else, I'm trying to get by, hoping that we're going to be opened up soon, and I can start getting to coaching again. And I'm trying to be honest, I'm trying to get out to as many clubs as I can and coach their wicket keepers. I think sometimes clubs can take their wicket keepers a little bit for granted, and perhaps not enough attention is made to their coaching. So I'm going to say to any clubs or any individuals that say I'm happy to travel to their grounds and just coach your keepers or coach an individual wicket keeper, and see what response that gets.
Well, it is a very specialist position, so I'm sure quite a few clubs will want to take up your offer there of some specialist coaching for wicket keeping.
Yeah, they can sometimes be dragged into the rubbish jobs like catching, taking field in practice, and keeping in nets, which is not a very pleasant thing to do, or just keeping to the bowlers on a practice square, which is not very pleasant either. So I just think there could be more attention on giving them a little bit of coaching as well. I'm trying to stick up for wicket keepers a bit, and perhaps one thing I want to launch is, have you ever seen a wicket-keeper be clapped off a pitch after taking 4 wickets or 4 catches or 5 catches? Because I've never seen it, and yet bowlers do all the time, don't they? And batsmen, if they get 35, they get clapped off. But I've never seen a wicket-keeper who catches 5 catches in a match be clapped off the pitch first. So there you go.
No, I've never seen that. There'll be something different, but something very well deserved. If a keeper can take 5 catches, he ought to be putting his hand up with the ball in his mittens. Finally, though, you said about returning to normal. If there is one thing you could do after June the 21st that you've not been able to do, what would it be?
Oh, dear. I'm just looking forward to being a bit of an older man, getting my deck chair and going to watch a bit of club cricket around the region, and sit there and watch players. What's really nice is that, as you say, I've been coached for the board and the MCCU and UCC for 20 years. So there's a lot of times I go to a match locally where, I watched a match last year where Sudbury played Bury St Edmunds, and there were 3 players on each side that I'd been coaching at Fenners for various times. And I watched a game at Saffron Walden, I think the year before perhaps, where Cambridgeshire were playing Hertfordshire. And there are 8 players that had been at Cambridge in the Cambridge scheme at one time or another. And so perhaps I'm just looking forward to sitting in the deck chair and watch them play, and without moaning at them and just sharing some of the times that we had together, because it was fun. And you'll never, when you have lads that when you have lads that probably come to me that have opened the batting for Hertfordshire under 17s the season before, and then on April the 1st, they're facing, because they're an opening batter, they're opening the batter against Essex and Lancashire and facing the likes of Jimmy Anderson and Jamie Porter and things like that. It's terrifying, but at the same time, it's something that they will have for the rest of their lives, and I'm looking forward to catching up and old war stories, as they say.
Well, that's something to look forward to. Thank you very much for joining me on the Paddock and the Pavilion and sharing your cricketing story.
Pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Paddock and the Pavilion. You can download the show on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher and Spotify. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Pad and Pav.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Don't forget that your skin is your largest organ, and the sun can be your skin's worst enemy. Dermatologist recommended Neutrogena products offer the ultimate protection for your skin. From makeup remover wipes to Hydro Boost Water Gel Facial Moisturizer, BJ's has your entire lineup of Neutrogena skincare products. And now through December 3rd, save $4 on any Neutrogena product at BJ's. Love your skin back and save now through December 3rd, only at BJ's.